Hi, everyone. It's Tracy here at TierraCast. Thanks for joining me. Um, if you were with me last week, I did a demo using polymer clay and some of our new bezels. It was really fun. We came up with a lot of nice examples of just, different techniques. I put in the description of last week's live stream. I am not a polymer clay expert, but the wonderful thing about polymer clay is it's very beginner friendly. And I have had some experience, of course, but certainly not an expert, but it was fun. And it was a great little demo to show. Let me see if I can get some comments going here. It was a great little demo to show some of the ways you can use bezels. Good morning, Lynn. I was actually thinking about you because I'm going to be demoing resin today. And Lynn works with resin. She's also a macrame artist. So we've worked with Lynn before, and I know that she does some resin. I'm like, maybe I should pick Lynn's brain before I go live. But I think I got enough info under my belt for the demos I want to do for you today. So as I said, I'm going to be using our new bezels from our Woodland collection. They're adorable, both of them. There's a little 1/2-inch bezel that's got beautiful leaf embellishment on the back. It's fits 12 to 13 millimeter cabochons, as well as it's just a canvas for all of the fun things you can do with an open bezel. And then the Poppy 1-inch bezel is just that. It's 1 inches and fits a 25 millimeter gemstone or glass cabochon. And I'm going to be demoing that today. I'm going to just show you how to glue a cabochon into the frames. So I'm going to go ahead and switch my camera. There's kind of a lot of little techniques I put on the agenda to demo. So let's see. So as I was saying, well, here first, let's look at the ones we did last week. So this was all polymer clay work. It was really fun. We used liquid polymer clay here. So that, if you're not familiar with it, it's just kind of a paint consistency, like a acrylic paint consistency, maybe a slightly thicker. And it's a liquid polymer clay, and you can blend the colors together and then bake them. And it was really fun to do that. And then we did blended some colors together and did kind of a faux gemstone sort of look. And then I did some impressions. I'm not crazy about those examples, but it is a possibility. You can do kind of impressions and then use paint with the polymer clay. And then I have some little stamps, letter stamps. And so I put some polymer clay in a bezel and some glitter, added some glitter to give it a little interest, and then used a stamp. So that was all fun. That was last week. You can catch that demo on our Facebook page or our YouTube channel. If you didn't catch that one, it's there on our Facebook page and on our YouTube channel, so you can watch that at any time. And I'm also going to work on a blog post for our website that will have links to those videos and some information on the different techniques. So today, kind of have a lot of stuff I want to demo. I've demoed glitter glass before. Glitter glass in a bezel is really fun because it gives kind of a faux druzy look. So I've played with that quite a lot. And you can do this with really any kind of resin. You can do it with a dimensional adhesive or a UV resin or a 2-part epoxy resin. So I'm going to use UV resin for those. And I'm also going to do a little bit of work with some dimensional adhesive and some images. And we've got glass cabochons to show and gemstone cabochons to show. And it's a lot of stuff. So I'm going to get busy. Karen Yates Waters is saying that she ordered some, just got them in on Saturday. I wonder, have you played with them yet, Karen? Super, it's just a lot of potential. Trying to figure out where to put this tray that I just took off my work surface. If I put it too far away, for sure, I'm going to need to look at it. So I need to put it someplace fairly reachable. Okay. Pardon me while I try and get a little organized. So what I have set up here is a little bit of some ideas with the UV resin. Again, I'm going to show you the glass glitter, and I'm going to show you, oh, I have a whole different tray. What I wanted to do really was start with the UV resin projects, because then I can stick them in their little UV lamp, which I have one sitting on a cart next to me. And I can stick them in there, and then they'll cure while we're working on the other things. So you can see that I have used glass glitter in other products that we have. Let me throw a link into the comments. This link is for, oh, Lynn's saying she put some organics in the new bezel and they turned out great. And I am going to do a little bit of that. Uh-oh, where's my camera? Hold on, guys. I might have to do a little technical adjustment here, because my second camera blinked off. Do you remember once upon a time when you were watching TV? Here we go. And something went wrong. They would flash a. I'm dating myself here. They would flash a message on the screen that said, "Please stand by for technical difficulties," or something like that. Anybody remember that? But we were talking about, what I have here is just a mat that I've covered with wax paper. That's kind of what I like to use when I'm working with messy stuff. The wax paper it can get a little bit messy, and then I can just clean it off and it'll dry and I can save it for the next time. Michelle remembers that message. Please stand by. We're experiencing technical difficulties or something. Okay, so going back, I want to do a little bit of the UV resin first, because then I can stick them in their little oven and get them cured while we're working on other stuff. So we like to use Lisa Pavelka's UV resin. There's a couple other brands out there. There's one called Gel du Soleil, also UV resin. Slightly thinner consistency than the Magic Gloss. Both of them work nice. You need sun or you need a UV light to cure these. UV lights are widely available either in craft stores for this kind of work, or they use UV lights for nail stuff. Manicure type of stuff. I don't do that, obviously, but I hear that's what they use. So you can find these pretty easily. You just need to look for UV light. I set this little sample up yesterday with this pretty pink, it's kind of a salmon color, and I'm going to use that one for our demo. It's a very easy process. You can just put a little drop, that's about 1/4 of an inch worth, into the bottom of the bezel. And you can sit and wait for it. It will self-level. You can kind of sit and wait for it to do that. Or you can just go ahead and put your glitter in, and it will all sort of settle down into the bottom. You end up sitting and waiting for a couple minutes while it does that. You can also nudge it along with toothpicks. I love using these little triangle trays for this kind of, for the glitter, because, I don't know, they just work well. So I've got some in there. In the interest of time, I'm going to help it. I'm going to help it kind of spread out. The UV resin will settle around all of the glass glitter and sort of soak it up. And then I'm going to add a little more. And the glitter will kind of continue to soak up the resin. And I think I said out loud, you could also do this with 2-part epoxy resin and dimensional adhesives, which we're going to do a little work with dimensional adhesives in our demo too. And the difference between a UV resin and a dimensional adhesive is that a dimensional adhesive is basically just a glue, a water-based glue that dries clear. And you can use them for, you can use that kind of adhesive for sealing images in bezels and also for gluing in cabochons and things like that. So we'll get to that. We'll get to that. In the meantime, I'm just going to keep kind of layering some glitter and resin in there until I'm liking the way it looks. And I should have put this on top of a little piece of paper so that I could just dump the spillover right into the bezel, but I wasn't thinking. Dimensional adhesives are great. They are water-based, so they're not as kind of waterproof as a UV resin or a two-part epoxy resin is, but they work pretty nicely. I'll show you when we get to the next demo. So I just nudge this around until I feel like it's good. If I feel like it needs it, I'll add another little bit of resin to make sure that there's enough that all the glitter is going to adhere. But this one looks okay. I think there's enough in there. I kind of like this salmony glitter in the brass ox bezel. I think it's a really nice combination. I want just a little bit. There's a little gap, and I'm trying to get a little piece of glitter in there to cover it up. And glass glitter is, I'm going to put just a tiny drop more. Glass glitter is glass, so, you know, it's pretty benign stuff, but it is still glass, so you want to make sure you don't, you know, get it on your hands and then rub your eye or anything like that. Just use some caution when you're using it. And that's enough. I'm going to go ahead and pop this into the little lamp. Oh, look, I'll tip this a little bit so you guys can see. My lamp is sitting over here on a cart. And for an application like this, that should cure in about 10 to 15 minutes. I have noticed that if your light bulb is getting old, it can kind of slow the process down. So that's it for glass glitter. You can see that we have other bezels. Did I put that link in there? I think I might have put it in there and never even said out loud why I was doing that. If you follow that link, it's just a search. It's a bezel search on our website. It will show you some of the other bezels that we have available, including we have some older ones, a beaded round bezel. We have some that were made to fit crystal flatback shapes. So if you go to that bezel link, you'll see that there's other shapes and styles besides our new ones from the Woodland collection. We're pretty excited about the ones in the Woodland collection, but there are other ones you can use too. All right, so glass glitter done. So the next thing I did is I wanted to play with some organics, or what? How did you say it, Lynn? Botanicals or organics. Karen's saying, I want to request that you make the thistle charm in a pendant size. It is beautiful. I will make a note of that. And I was going to say I'll make a note of that and pass that on to Kirsten. But then I see a comment from Kirsten. She's watching. So Kirsten, did you hear that? Karen wants the thistle charm at a pendant size. All right. So I dried some fern leaves, and I used just a traditional flower press. There are other ways to do this quicker. I'm going to throw another link in here right now for you guys, because if you have followed TierraCast at all, I'm jumping ahead a little bit with this link, but it's going to take you to the Beading Gem, which is a blog, and it's put together and written and curated by our friend Pearl Blay. She's up in Canada, and she has a lot of experience with resin. So I just put a link in there that is to her most recent blog about using flowers in resin. But if you do a search on her blog page, she's got a lot of articles about using resins. So she's really informative. And while I was researching all of this stuff for my demo, one of the things that she talks about is a microwave flower press. So they actually have these flower presses that are like clay, and you layer the things in them and you put them in the microwave. And so you get your dried pressed flowers in minutes instead of days or weeks. So that's not what I did. I did this the traditional way. I just used a traditional flower press. Now, what I did find is that they kind of dried out. Of course, they dried out my flowers, and the leaves got a little bit brown. So I touched them up with a little bit of acrylic paint, just to give them a little bit more brightness back. And then, so the next step, I feel like I'm not going in a very linear fashion with my stuff here, but I'm trying to tell you guys things as they come to me. So once you've got pressed flowers, botanicals are tricky. Sometimes the flower or a leaf will really dry out and completely change color when it's dried and pressed. Sometimes they will get translucent. There are different ways you might want to seal them in your different resin processes. And one of those is to just coat them with kind of an acrylic sealer. And I should also mention that if you're prepping images for use with UV resin, you want to be sure not to prep them with a water-based product. So for example, if I was using 2-part epoxy resin, I could take my leaf. I guess I didn't save any leaves that were still not sealed up to show you guys. But I could take my leaf and seal it with like Mod Podge or something like that. And then as long as it's all nice and sealed up and it won't soak up the resin, then I can use 2-part epoxy resin. UV resin doesn't like water-based stuff. It's better if you use an acrylic or non-water-based stuff. So you would want to use a clear acrylic to seal them, or another wonderful recommendation from Pearl's blog, laminating them. So that's what I did when I did some examples, is I laminated them in this plastic, and then I just cut them out. And now the next thing I'll do, actually you can already see, I wanted to do another leaf like this for you guys with UV resin. And so I used a 1/2-inch punch to cut out my leaf. And all I need to do is, that's all sealed up. I don't have to worry at all about anything in there, about any resin seeping into the image or affecting it. And all I need to do is pop my little sealed up image in there. I put a little bit down in the bottom of the resin because I want to then kind of press this down in there. And the reason for that is I want to make sure it's well pressed down in there, because I don't want bubbles coming up from underneath when I put the resin over the top. And I don't need to let that dry or anything, because it's the UV resin and it's all going to cure in the UV oven. So then I'm putting some resin in there. I'm going to watch for bubbles. You have to watch for bubbles. You want to let it sit maybe 10 minutes at least, so that you can watch for those bubbles and get rid of them before you put them in the UV lamp. The way to get rid of a tiny bit more resin, the way to get rid of the bubbles is you can just use some tweezers to scoop them out. I don't know if you can see. I'll bring it up. You can see that there are a couple little bubbles in there. So I can just take a pair of tweezers. I want to make sure they're kind of clean. Make sure there's nothing on the tips. And I can kind of just scoop out that bubble. But another way to get rid of bubbles in UV resin is to use a heat source. So if you had matches or a lighter, you could kind of just pass the matches or lighter over the top of your piece. I have found that a little thread burner also works. If I'm just holding on to the button so that the thread burner heats up, and I kind of hold that over the bubbles, they'll just pop. It's really wonderful. And this is kind of magic. I often get a lot of bubbles that I have to deal with, but this one looks great. I do think it needs a teeny bit more resin. Okay, and so if you look at this one, actually both of these, I set that little round right into the base of the bezel, and I also want to angle that a little bit, turn it before I put it in the oven. With these two, I put a little bit of resin down in the bottom of the bezel, just a little bit, and I put that in the UV light to cure, and then I set the leaves on top so that there would be a little bit of a lift. I don't know if you can really see it, but it just is not set down on the bottom, so it's kind of lifted up off the bottom, which gives it a little bit of dimensionality. I like that idea. So I put the thin layer on the bottom, I let that cure, and then I put my leaf piece on top of that, and then layered another layer of UV resin over the top, and then I cured it. This one was encased in plastic, was laminated, like the one I just put in here. This one, I wanted to see what would happen. Set this down. I wanted to see what would happen if I didn't laminate the leaf, how that dried leaf would react to the UV resin. And it didn't discolor. It didn't soak up the resin. It was great, except that it curled. It kind of curled up instead of staying flat. So keeping them flattened, the laminator is a great way to do that. So this one now, I've got resin in there. I see one tiny little bubble. And I'm going to go ahead and put that in the lamp. And that's how easy that one is. Now with this one, I did the same thing. I used the UV resin, but I put in a layer of paper underneath. So what I want to do is do another little example of one of these using a paper image, because there's a different prep you have to do. So with paper images, you want to make sure that your paper is sealed. So again, if I was using, and this is kind of a nice quality printer. Oh, actually, this is scrapbook paper. We printed on scrapbook paper. So it's not cardstock. It's just kind of a thick paper. And another option is to print on photo paper. And if you print on a nice photo paper and you know that your ink is not going to bleed, that it's not going to dissolve in the resin, then you could just put the image itself on photo paper into a bezel with UV resin. But with 2-part epoxy resin. But with UV resin, you definitely want to seal it up, or with thinner paper. No matter what, sealing it is a great idea. So for 2-part epoxy resin, I could do this with Mod Podge or some other, clear drying adhesive. With the UV resin, because I don't want to use a water-based product, I'm going to use the paper. I mean the tape. This is just clear packing tape, and that works really well for this. And then there's also we've done some demos. We did one around Halloween where we did this process with our I can speak. Give me a sec. Let me get some examples for you. We did that process with our rings. So where there's no back. And so we have a video demo of that too. I will share that with you guys. we did a bunch of this around Halloween one year, and that was just a blast. We used a bunch of like Halloweenish images and added some inclusions, some little spacers. That was just a blast. So this technique is really fun and has a lot of possibility. The process is pretty much the same. You seal up the paper, and then you can put it into your bezel, or in that case, into the ring. This bezel you can use a 1-inch punch. It is best to make sure that you don't have any exposed tape when you do that. Otherwise, it can get kind of hung up in there. But the 1-inch punch works great for this bezel. And Kirsten was very intentional about the size. She wanted to make sure that that you could use a commercial punch for images. So I've cut that out. Oops, I see a little bit of extra tape over here that I just want to trim off. And then what I want to do, again, this is to make sure that my image doesn't soak up the resin after we put it in the bezel, is I'm just going around the outside edge with some super glue. And then I can actually use super glue down in the bottom to adhere this. The super glue works great when you're working with UV resin. It doesn't react with it at all. And again, I want glue in the bottom because I don't want bubbles coming up from underneath. So I'm just using a brush on super glue. And then I'm going to take my little butterfly image and pop it down in there. And I'm going to use a cotton swab to just press it down. And if that super glue kind of gets on the top and gets kind of smeared around on the top, don't worry about it, because the UV resin you won't even see that once the UV resin's on there. I do want to let that seal good. So now if I was going to do this, what I would do next is put a layer of the the magic gloss, the UV resin, over the top. And then I would put that in to cure. And when it was all cured, and that would be a thin layer, and then I would add an image, which let's just go ahead with this. We can punch this out with the punch, or we can cut it out around the shape of the leaf. And I actually think that that's what I'm going to do. Lynn is suggesting for getting rid of, oh wow, we got some spam messages, guys. Let me see if I can get rid of them. Sorry. There. Lots of questions. Let me catch up a little bit. Yes, Lynn, that was packing tape. Nice, clear packing tape. You could also use Scotch tape, but if you were working with a smaller image. Blowing on bubbles is also a good way to, the heat of your breath brings them up and pops them. I find that this is faster. Karen is also asking about the sealing the image. Yes, that was packing tape. Could you enclose in a double-sided tape instead of laminate? A double-sided tape. I'm not sure what you're meaning, Randy. If you mean a tape that's sticky on both sides, it wouldn't seal. That seems like it would be tricky because, again, it would be sticky on both sides. So, yes, you could maybe stick the image down and it would be sealed on the back, but then you would have to still have something over the top. All right, so where I was going was I could use a punch to punch this out, or I can cut around the edges. And this actually, the laminate did a little bit of funkiness around the edges of the leaf. So I'm going to go ahead and just use the scissors instead. And I don't want those funky areas. So I'm just going to use the scissors to go around the leaf. You can can find, we have a laminator here in the office, but you can also find kind of small household craft ones that are small. And I didn't really look at prices, but I'm assuming they're not horribly expensive. Okay, so will this fit in there? Not quite. I need to cut some off of this back. Maybe even just quite a bit smaller. Okay, so I'm going to do the layer over the top, a thin layer, and then we'll let that cure, and then we'll put the leaf down and add another layer over at the top. So this will be a multi-step little process. It's going to take, we're going to have to set this in the lamp to cure and then get it out somewhere later in the demo and do some more work on it. I don't actually have to dip the tip of this in the resin. I just need to hold it over the top. Some of them, if they're deeper down in the resin, they're going to be a little resistant. But what we'll do right now is just let this one, set this one aside and let it level for a little bit before we come back to it. The glass glitter we put in the UV oven, UV lamp is done. So there's the, I'm tipping it over because I want to see if any of the glitter falls out, but it looks like we had a pretty good layer and it's fine. This little leaf has been in there for a while, probably not quite ready, and I'm not going to touch it to test it, so I'm going to leave that in there for a little longer. And when this levels and looks a little more ready, I will put that one in the lamp. And then we'll come back later and add the little layer of leaf. So that's it for the UV resin. That's what I wanted to show you with that. It's great stuff. I really enjoy working with it. I just need to figure out what to do with all this stuff to make room for the next thing I want to demo. Aha, here's the thing. Okay. Those ones are out of the way. So the next thing I want to demonstrate is dimensional adhesive. So that, again, you're going to get, you can do the same processes. You do not need a UV lamp, but you do need time because it takes a while to cure. So many years ago, when we first had these, when we first had bezels in our line, you know, I showed you this one. This was one of our very first ones, and that's going way back to like 2009. We experimented with a lot of different products with those, and two of the dimensional adhesives we used were Judican's Diamond Glaze and Aleene's Paper Glaze. Very comparable products. You can use them. And I'm seeing something right here. Something you can also do with these products is you can mix in colors. So you could use like alcohol inks and mica powder. So you can add colors to those kind of things. Way back when, we created a kind of a cheat sheet that talked about different things you could use in our bezels. I'm in the process of updating that, and we're going to do a blog and share all of that with you. I don't think I'll get it done this week. It'll probably be next week that I get that blog ready for you guys, and then I'll share it. And it will have all kinds of great info about using using all the different stuff. So you saw that when I brought this out, what is the thickness of the laminate? That was just a kind of a standard laminate sheet that I used. I know that it comes in different thicknesses, but I would say this one was garden variety. I don't have them handy right now. I can't go grab one to show you, but it was just kind of the garden variety thickness that you would use for office needs. I know that it comes in a variety of sizes too. So, so if you're working with a bunch of little pieces of leaves and flowers, I used a 3.5 by 5 inch laminate sheet that worked great, because I don't want to use a great big 8.5 by 10 or anything. It would just take up too much, be a lot of waste. So if you notice, when I brought this over, I had these two pieces covered up, and that's because I prepped them yesterday, and I needed to have them protected so they could cure and not get dust in them. So I just plopped little measuring cups. You get these with, if you use 2-part epoxy resin, you get these little cups in there for measuring. And they also work super well for this. So I just had some little cups over there, and that sealed these up so that they wouldn't, they could cure in peace, because it does take some time, and they wouldn't get fouled up with the dust or anything else that might fall in there. So many years ago, when we first did those other bezels, we did an earring project that people just loved. And what we did was we used dictionary paper. I think this looks like it was in French. I don't have that dictionary around anymore, but we used dictionary paper, and we just used some dimensional adhesive to make these little earrings that we called Novella Earrings. And they were so popular. The project was so popular. Our stores, that we made some sheets and we gave them to them, and they used them in their stores for projects, and they just loved it. So I thought I would do a little variation of that for this project. So I did some testers yesterday. This is the one we're going to do. Just a cute little, with some dictionary page in the back and a little spacer as an accent. This one I did just for the fun of it in one of the big frames. The process of prepping your stuff is similar with, let me get off of this, because we don't want to be on the mat where I'm going to play with the adhesive. Something to mention, which you may notice on the card, the dimensional adhesives we used reacted with copper. Every other metal finish was fine, but we got this kind of strange blue effect around the edges where it came in contact with copper. So I did that in a copper one, knowing it was going to happen, but remembering how fun it kind of was. And I also had that happen with this because there was moisture underneath, and it was copper, and there's actually a leaf in there. Don't know if you can see it, but it just did bizarre things that ended up being quite beautiful. So I saved it. So the process for prepping the images is pretty much the same. You kind of want to seal things up. So I've got my packing tape. And again, you could use, now we're using a dimensional adhesive. So in this case, you could, well, with some pictures, I guess you could use Mod Podge to seal it. Although why you wouldn't just use this too, I'm not sure. I'm a tape fan. I just like to use the tape to seal these up. The point is what I was trying to make was this is water-based, so you don't have to worry about mixing it with another water-based product. It won't have a reaction. So I've got some tape down on both sides of my little dictionary page. And again, I can use a punch, a 1/2 inch punch for this one. And when I did this one, I did not seal up the edges with what do you call it? Super glue. And that was okay. The resin seeped in just a little bit around the edges, but it gives it kind of an antiquing effect. So I want that in this case. So I'm not going to seal up the edges of this one. And then the diamond glaze, I need to make sure I have it's going to come out. So I keep a little pin handy. I'm just going to put a tiny little drop underneath. I'm going to set my little image down in there. When I'm working with stuff like this, I keep a little container of toothpicks and cotton swabs handy, because they really are good tools for doing all this stuff. Lynn makes a good comment for this project. You can just get old dictionaries at thrift stores. And then if you're like me, I have a little bit of it's a stumbling block for me to start tearing apart a book, any book, but you just have to get over that and start picking your pages and cutting pages out. So, and what's fun about that is you can really do themes. So I picked my words intentionally with this. I picked evoke and peace, and I liked that. So I've got that in there, and I was pressing it around pretty thoroughly, as you saw, because I want to minimize as much as possible any chance of bubbles coming up. And I'll go ahead and put a little spacer in there for a little bit of embellishment. You'll note originally I was going to throw a copper one in there, and I was like, wait a minute, the copper reacts with this water-based dimensional adhesive, so I switched to silver. I liked the idea of the mixed metals, but Lynn also says you can make copies of the pages. You could, but in this case, I liked that these are old dictionaries, so the paper is kind of yellowed. And I think that was part of the appeal for this particular project. Wait, okay. So you can see that this goes in and it's a little bit cloudy when it's before it starts drying. And as it dries, it will clear. So you want now to just set this guy aside. And you want to keep an eye on it for a little while, because this first part is when you're going to be checking for bubbles. You're going to be watching for bubbles. So you're going to want to set it someplace safe and put something over it to keep it protected. And then don't, remember that it's there, and don't move stuff around and accidentally jostle it. You could even take a piece of tape, whatever your work surface is, you could take a piece of tape and kind of stick this down in place so it doesn't get moved around. And as I think I started to say and didn't finish, don't forget about it. You're going to want to check it in a little bit for bubbles. And then once you know that you've given it some time to let any bubbles come up and you've taken care of those, then this needs to sit for a day. I made these ones that I did these two yesterday, and just set them. It was yesterday afternoon, and then I covered them up and set them aside. And looked, and when I took the cups off this morning, they were nice and done. But they really do want some time. And I'm also going to stick a pin back here into the nozzle of my glue so that hopefully it won't be plugged up the next time I want to use it. So The diamond glazes are fun. Like I said, you can add paint and colors, and they do take longer. They're not quite the instant gratification of the UV resin, but you can do the same kind of stuff. It doesn't dome quite as well as the UV resin does either. You can get a nice dome with UV resin, but the dimensional adhesive, it doesn't seem like it get quite as much of a dome with them. This is being very slow about its leveling, so I'm going to help it. Otherwise, we won't be able to finish this one in the time we have today. And all of these techniques will work with the two-part resins as well. You just, with a two-part epoxy resin, you have the main, I actually have a couple of them here. Let me see if I can get this leveled enough to put it in the UV light. With any stuff like this, anytime you're using adhesives, really, you want to have some ventilation happening. So I have a window open in here, and I have a fan kind of aiming everything towards that window. Anytime you're working with adhesives and stuff like this, it's just a good idea. This stuff is all non-toxic, but some of those glues especially have a super strong smell. All right, so that's more level. I'm just going to go ahead and put it into the lamp. Being a little bit picky here, trying to get it to the edges. But since I'm going to put another layer over anyway, it's not really going to matter. So into the lamp it goes. So that is dimensional adhesive. I have a couple of different two-part epoxies. I'm not going to demo those today. I thought I might, but you know what? They're just a little more fussy in that you have to measure. You have to be very careful with your measuring. The ice resin is a great one. You need to measure, I think it's equal amounts, and you stir it very carefully so you don't get a lot of bubbles, and then you use it as a resin, and then you would want to do this kind of thing to protect it and let it cure for 24 hours. It takes time as well. And then what's wonderful about these type of resins is they are so durable and so waterproof. So that is kind of the great thing about using a UV resin, is the durability. So another good one is the little windows. It is a 2-to-1 measurement. You know, you buy different brands and they might have different ratios. So with this one, it's 2 parts of the resin and 1 part of the hardener. And then you go with the same techniques. And again, if you go to Pearl's blog, there is just a wealth of crafty resin tips in her different blog articles on resin. So the last thing I want to demo is cabochons. So the smaller bezels are 1/2 inch and fit 12 to 13 millimeter cabochons. That's a very common size for gemstones, and you can also get 1/2 inch glass bezels. The larger bezel is 1 inch or about 25 millimeters, and so that's also a common size for gemstone cabochons and glass bezels. So like I said, Kirsten was careful about that. She wanted to make sure that these bezels would be usable with the stuff that you can find out there. So it's using cabochons in one of these bezels is a snap. You could use a 2-part epoxy adhesive if you're more comfortable with that. You know it's going to be secured with a 2-part epoxy. You can also just use an E6000. I have a nice fresh tube so it wouldn't be all funky and thick. You know how E6000 can get a little bit thick. So I just put some, again, in a perfect world, we'd probably clean this. You'd maybe use some acetone or something just to clean out the inside of the bezel. With any of the stuff we just did, you should probably do that. But all you need to do is put the little bit of glue in there. And then put your cabochon in there. And I'm kind of pressing and swirling it to try and get that glue to kind of spread out underneath. I guessed at the amount. You know, I wanted to put enough in there that it would, you know, be enough to hold it, but I don't want it to be so thick that it's oozing out the sides. So it looks like I did a pretty good guess. I'm pressing it and moving it, and I'm not getting a lot around the, squeezing out around the side. And you do want to try and make sure your little cabochon is as centered as possible. This was a piece of carnelian. It's very pretty. Maybe I should have put that in the copper. Anyway, there it is. It's in the brass. And then the glass cabochons. The original designs that I showed you, remember I said I had that whole tray of other stuff and I wanted to make sure I kept it handy. So they're wonderful for doing images. And these two lovely little pieces, we worked with a designer named Sandra Younger. She is the inventor. She's a macrame artist, and so she's the inventor of the Naughty Do-It-All board, which is really fun. I actually have a link here. I'll share that with you guys. But we sent her. We wanted some. Where's Sandra's link? There it is. We wanted some macrame pieces to go with the designs that we created for the Woodland collection. And so we knew Sandra would be great for that. So we sent her a lot of materials and some bezels and stuff. And she used the bezels with glass cabochons and images. So that was inspiring. It's just a simple process. I watched a few different demos for working with the glass cabochons and really saw that people were not as concerned about, I think I'll use one of these in here this time. People were not as concerned about sealing the paper, and there's also a lot of flexibility in the glue that you may want to use. I saw it done with E6000. So just someone had an image, put a little E6000 in the bottom, pressed the image down, and really pressed it to make sure it was well sealed. And then they used a little more E6000 and plopped that UV resin, the glass cabochon on the top, and again pressed it around to make sure that everything spread nicely. And hold on, I want to grab a different one, or maybe I'll just use the copper one. And then I also saw it done with Mod Podge. How's that going to look in there? It's going to look pretty good. So I'm going to use this laminated fern leaf with a little flower. So instead of, well, what the heck? I'm going to try the the E6000. So yesterday I did this one. Same thing. I just got a picture out and I sealed it up. And I used this Crafter's Pick Ultimate Super Glue. And it's just basic water-based adhesive that dries super clear. And that worked pretty well. It seems like it's not fully dry because I still see a little bit of a white kind of layer in there. So maybe that glue is not completely dry, but it worked very easily, and we'll just leave it and hopefully it'll dry more thoroughly and that little bit of white will go away. But I'm going to go ahead and try the E6000. I do want to kind of spread that glue thoroughly. I hope I put enough in there. I want it to go all the way across. Maybe I'll even use this to press it down, which I guess I'm going to do that anyway, right? So now my image is in there. I think I might pop this out and put a little more glue in there. I'm not convinced I have enough. If I can pop it out. Maybe not. And I'm basing that on the fact that I want it to be kind of an even coat, and it doesn't feel like it's quite even. I'm just going to put a tiny bit more in there. We shall see. And then maybe I'll just put it on the back of the cabochon. Ideally, you would make sure the back of give your cabochon a little bit of cleaning there. Make sure that there's no dirt and fingerprints are kind of minimized. I did not do that. I put glue on before I thought of it, but this is one of those do as I say, not as I do things. Which every time I use that phrase, I think of my dad. Do as I say, not as I do. So, yeah, the glass cabochons are super, like, instant gratification. So nice. So I do want to make sure that's centered, because, you know, it would be a magical world if everything was just like a perfect fit, but no, not really. So make sure that's centered before it starts drying. Let's take this guy out and see if we can pop that other layer in real quick. Put that in the this layer of UV resin feels pretty cured. Let's not get mixed up. Let's not put E6000 on that. Let's go back to the UV resin. And now I'm really going to be generous with this because I want a nice dome effect. And we're going to wrap up our demo before, of course, this finishes curing, but you'll be able to see before I put it in the lamp what it's going to look like. My little work surface must be ever so slightly not flat, because I can see that my resin in my bezels is leaning. So again, with the getting rid of bubbles in the UV resin, You can either, I think I demonstrated just using a pair of tweezers to scoop them out. That is absolutely an option. I think I demonstrated that in the early piece. But I really love just a heat source. It's just less messy. And like I said, it can be a match. It can be, you can just kind of blow on it with, so the heat from your breath, you don't want to blow hard, because you don't want to move things around, but it will work if you just kind of use the heat of your breath. You can also set it on a slightly warm surface, and that will kind of make the bubbles come up quicker. Like, for example, I might set this on top of the UV lamp, not inside, but on top because it's warm from the light bulb. And if there was a lot of layered stuff in a piece, that would be a good way to just let it sit there and let any bubbles come up that might be hiding in there under the different layers of stuff. So I like this technique of using a layer and then letting that cure and then adding another element, because it just gives it that little bit of dimensionality. And I was generous. Remember, I was generous with the resin. So here it's possibly a tiny bit too generous because it's trying to run over the edges. But that's okay. I can pop that into the light and that will cure. And you can see, because it's got a little bit of a dome, it's got that kind of that nice effect. So I think that's it, guys. I think I've covered everything I wanted to share with you. There's a lot of stuff on this little work surface. It's looking pretty cluttered. Oh, let's look at this one again. This one is just starting to cure. It's been sitting there for a bit. This is a good time to check for bubbles, and I don't see any. So this one just goes back kind of in a little hiding place and gets covered and gets allowed to cure. Whoops. I should probably sit this right in the toaster oven. I'm mixing up my demos. Last week it was a toaster oven. This week it's a UV light. I need to get that in there before I bump it and ruin it or something. So just there's a lot of potential with the different materials you can use. This is some of our older Bezel products. We have a couple little rectangle and a square, and we have that beaded round one, and we have some larger squares. We have also done a lot of work. We have a series of bezels that are made for Rivoli crystal stones. Those are also great canvases for, this is a polymer clay design. This is just some layered metal parts and a crystal in there. This is some fiber art with adhesive and a little bead glued to the top. And this is I'm trying to think of the name of the gemstone, but it's a gemstone cabochon. So our new bezels are great. Also have a lot of old ones that have some potential. We love this one. This is one that I talked about Tanya Duarte last week, because she's a polymer clay artist who did a pendant for us, some polymer clay pendants for us. And this is one of them. She did clay and moss, and then she layered it over the top with resins. So just really wonderful. And let's look at this one again. That one definitely came out good. I like the way that came out. I don't remember if I said it out loud when I, yes, I did. When I had dried my pieces of fern, I wasn't quite happy with how dark they got, so I touched them up with a little bit of acrylic paint, and I could have done that with this little yellow flower too. That would have been good. But so yeah, options, possibilities. So yeah, that's all I got for you today. It's a lot. So I am going to put together a blog, kind of talking about all of these different techniques, and I'll have this PDF, this downloadable PDF, updated and ready on that blog so that you can download it. So it's got just helpful, it's got a little bit of information about the E6000 and what it's good for. It's got information about the dimensional glazes and the two-part epoxy and the UV resin. So that'll be a nice resource when I get that all put together. And I think that blog will be ready next week. Originally, I was going to try and have it done this week, but I don't think it's going to happen. So oh, yes, Karen, thank you. That is a very good point. She says, make sure you're not in front of a sunny window when working with the UV resin. It will start to cure, and it will. When I was working yesterday, I was working in front of the UV lamp, so I didn't have the pieces inside the UV lamp, but it was enough to make them start to cure before I was done working with them. So yeah, that is a very good point. So get some bezels and some materials, you guys, and have some fun. And I'm not going to do a live demo next week because I'm going to be out of town this weekend and won't have time to get things properly set up. I have a little getaway to, I'm going to a beach house in Stinson Beach for a few days. So I am really looking forward to that. So I will see you guys in a couple of weeks, and thank you. And I will see you next time.